I'm Kathryn Libal. I direct the Human Rights Institute, and I'm an associate professor in social work and human rights. I've been involved in the workshop actually from the beginning. So when the Abrahamic initiative started, I was a part of the steering committee and am involved actually in all of the conferences. So this was both particularly of interest to me because I would like to know more about environment and the intersection with environment, ecology, and religion. And it also is the conference that happened immediately before a conference that I'm more of a key organizer on, and that's on public health and the Abrahamic traditions in the Middle East and North Africa. So it was a really great bridge to be able to think about how scholars and other practitioners are grappling with climate change, kind of at the intersection of environment around water, access, heat, and trying to build sustainable systems as we move into thinking about also health, which will be the topic of the next conference. So the first conference really tried to center on the idea of how might we look at these three traditions together. So Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and what are some of the kind of common themes in thinking about the importance of those faiths today, thinking also about the kind of challenges of the region. The first conference was both deeply historical and also interdisciplinary. And it was kind of laying the foundation then to pursue other more specific topics as the initiative moves forward. The theme around environment is really pressing. So there's a lot of emergent activism in the Middle East around environment, but it doesn't necessarily get as much press or kind of visibility as some of the other things that are going on there. So we wanted to foreground that very early on, particularly given how profound climate change is and how much it's impacting different countries in the region. So UConn's had a long-standing commitment to interdisciplinary inquiry, and it has a very strong Judaic studies program, and it's been growing its capacity in terms of religious studies in general. We also have a lot of other interdisciplinary units where people are used to talking to each other kind of across silos and boundaries. So an example of that would be the Human Rights Institute or the Humanities Institute or a number of different centers and institutes in the STEM fields. And I think what what the leadership was really hoping to go for, and faculty are engaged in the initiative, is to try to, again, bridge some of those silos. So if we can get scientists and theologians talking to one another about pressing concerns of the day, that might generate important new knowledge and also maybe pathways for action. My familiarity in the field is much more in terms of human rights. So I'm a human rights scholar. And one interesting thing is that human rights studies, human rights scholarship often kind of shies away from working on religion. And so while I had an undergraduate background in comparative religion, it's been a long time since I've been thinking about the role of faith in mobilizing communities and in thinking about problems. So for me, it was really wonderful to be able to see a range of different really phenomenal scholars and experts in their fields trying to tackle a problem as momentous as climate change, and coming from grounded scholarly backgrounds, but really committed to trying to work to get ideas out that would resonate with communities. So, it kind of challenged me to think about, I've been so focused on human rights, what else do I need to be doing to think about alliances to actually move forward on this issue? Before the conference, I was already increasingly concerned about environmental change. I come from Alaska. We're seeing some really profound effects in a short period of time around the transforming climate. And so I was ready and primed to engage in a conference that was going to bring new thoughts, new ideas, new actors to talk about what we might do. The sessions were wonderful, and the way the conference was set up, I thought really worked to get people talking. There were short presentations and then a lot of time set aside for conversation, even during the sessions. But as with almost any conference, thankfully, the key organizers set aside a lot of time just to interact more informally. And that's where I think some of the most interesting ideas were being generated. It was the relationships being formed at the conference and the fact that there were, so many wonderful people there who had enough time to engage each other that I think was one of the most important outcomes. So as I sat, over snacks or dinner with people who were doing work on the Jordan River, and especially the work of EcoPeace, just thinking about what is their model? How do they organize? How do they grapple with that really pressing issue in a politically contentious moment and context? And just felt deeply impressed by the creativity of the people in that organization. Rhodes is a crossroads space within a region that's a crossroads, right? And it's been historically a crossroads. Migration, movement of ideas, intellectual kind of convenings and collaborations, and actually the convergence of empires. So Rhodes has a long and deep history that really centers on these religious traditions. And there's living in Rhodes also the three faiths. So it was really amazing to go out in our time, like in Rhodes, and be able to see, some of the older sites of worship, whether they be from the Islamic faith or from Judaism or Christianity. I think it was a wonderful space to be able to come together and really think about both the layering of history and cultures, and then also our current moment where we needed to come together and really talk about tackling something that everybody's experiencing. First of all, I think just putting us in a place where we couldn't easily be checking our phones all day and engaging the work that might be happening at home was brilliant. I personally gathered the most out of the informal interactions, although I thought that those were meaningful because I actually got to hear and listen to the ideas that were being shared on the panels, right? So it was a kind of iterative process of thinking about what was being shared by these experts and others in the room who were maybe coming to the ideas for the first time from their position, thinking about, what it means actually to transfer knowledge that you've gained from working on the Jordan River reclamation to the Nile River or to the Tigris or the Euphrates. I mean, I didn't expect to learn about that from people who are very deeply embedded within religious communities. For me, sharing a lot of amazing food and having a chance to really honor the incredible wealth of the sea in Rhodes was wonderful. And then I have to be quite honest, actually, going up to a historic ancient site with the two filmmakers for the project was probably a highlight. There were diverse voices in the room, both in terms of kind of where people were at in their careers. There were some graduate students and people who were very early in their careers and work. And then there were others who were coming from the practitioner community. They might be working for an NGO that's trying to work on environmental issues. And then much more senior scholars who devoted their lives to thinking about the link between ecology and and religion. I think for me, what I saw was genuine openness and willingness to have conversations and to be ready to learn something new and to listen to multiple voices. It was a very friendly, I think very friendly context. One could feel like you could speak hard ideas and not have somebody immediately judge you. And I've seen after the conference in the ongoing email communications and in the sharing of information and just recognition of each other's important holy days that there's, an effort really to try to maintain some of those ties. So there's already work amongst Mary Evelyn and others to do a mapping exercise to again identify other organizations that like EcoPeace or the varied groups that were there, what's going on in the region that we may not have known about. I've encouraged, for example, engaging potentially more NGOs in Turkey that are working on water issues and might also intersect with religion. And I know that we are also talking about what lessons can we learn from this conference to really bring some of that spirit and dynamism to the next conference, as well as maybe we bridge with some of the people that we invited there and have them also be involved in some way in the next conference, which is around public health in the region. And, I think finally, some of us are starting to attend each other's events. So I'm likely headed to Israel for the first time in my career in February to be there when EcoPeace and other colleagues are doing some of their important work around the Jordan River. And, that's just one small example. I think probably other participants have other ways in which they're engaged. I guess I would just say one other thing is that this was impactful enough on me that I've made changes in a course for this semester. And I've kind of infused, I didn't set aside a separate session around climate and environmental justice, but I've started to infuse a conversation about it and materials and, trying to use documentary and some readings right from the beginning of the class, and it will run throughout. We are in a climate emergency, and we are thinking about planetary collapse. So those are two very extreme ideas that I think many people in the United States would just look away from and think, oh, that's just exaggerating. It's really not going to be that bad. The scientists are going to figure out a fix. So kind of holding on to that idea without panicking and thinking we need to develop tools to create alliances and methods to create much more rapid social transformation, like no longer using straws or eliminating plastic bags from grocery stores is important, but it is not nearly enough to try to tackle the effects we're seeing right now. And so, how do we work with people? And I do think that the connection with faith communities and mobilization across different groups who might be working toward climate justice, we have to do that, and we have to do it at a much more rapid pace, deliberately, but without wasting any time. So I do think that religion provides a really strong basis for people to go about their daily lives. It gives purpose and meaning. It often is what animates all their relationships and decisions they make. And I think there's something much more intrinsic or intangible that you can't quite identify rationally that provides people with the drive to go on, even if things seem really difficult. So in that respect, I think, for someone, a social scientist who's trained in a field that's often quite secular, taking seriously the potential strengths of looking at faith and faith communities, and not only being invested in the ideas that judicial action is going to get us there, or just electing the right president is going to get us there. I think that's important. And so I do think that there's a kind of energy and potential to be harnessed that is really in everybody's interests. People's sense of spirituality and faith is very diverse, and we're often shown a kind of religion where we're kind of shown that there's one way, one path, right? I think this is an opportunity and a moment for those of us who may have been raised in religious backgrounds but not actively practicing to think about what are the ways in which we can communicate effectively and be in partnership with faith leaders and their communities to address something that if we don't all work on, our children and our children's children are going to really suffer, and the planet in which they live is going to face far too much trauma. Like, do we want that for them? Isn't it our obligation to work swiftly and smartly and with full commitment to try to tackle this challenge that we've created?